All right, in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Hello, my name is Terrell Jerks, the managing editor of Random Links News, and with us today is Lamar Lyons, who is the president of the Central Neighborhood Council, the Central San Pedro Neighborhood Council, but he is also a candidate running for the 65th Assembly District. And he brings a lifetime of experience uplifting working people in both the public and private sectors. He understands the struggles and triumphs of being a single parent and business owner. An industry and community leader, Lyons says his dual perspective positions him to tackle the district's economic and social challenges. A San Pedro resident for more than 30 years, Lyons combines local knowledge with policy expertise to address access to clean air and water, affordable housing, fair employment, and community care. He says he knows how to align capital with community needs and deliver results for everyday families. All right, Lamar, go on. Tell us anything more you need to add to that bio to yourself?
Well, I think there's one element that distinguishes me from the others. I've actually worked at the assembly line, Douglas Aircraft, and also worked in the warehouse. So I have a background in regards to labor, and you combine that with my background in finance, working for Wall Street firms. I think I bring a unique combination to the table.
Oh, I know that's right. And you're in an interesting situation where you're running. It's a race filled with 6 candidates, although we're only going to be interviewing 5 of the progressive candidates. The issue is that there are 2 front runners, one who has ran the 3 times, with this 3rd race being the 3rd time, and Fatima Iqbal-Zubair. And then there's Dr. Ayanna Davis, who was endorsed by outgoing Assemblyman Mike Gibson. And I'm just curious, what do you bring to the table that the perceived front runners of this race does not?
They don't talk about solutions. They don't talk about job creation. They don't talk about how do you add on to a public safety type of approach in regard to in my opinion, a deliverance of services to the people versus the people having to come to the services. What I'm talking about specifically is promoting like a big van that would consist of health providers, not only from a physical standpoint, from a mental standpoint. So that's something that I'm talking about from a solution standpoint. In regards to employment or jobs, we have in this district a major piece of land called Phillips 66. There's no discussion about how that land can be repurposed for manufacturing versus what is being promoted in terms of warehouses. Those are the items I think that makes a difference between myself and them. They don't talk about issues.
Okay. Aside from those specific issues that you just brought up, I would imagine you've canvassed most of the 65th district from north to south. What are the main issues are you hearing the most about?
Mainly air quality, employment opportunities, and also the whole thing of deliverance of what I call basic needs when it comes to healthcare. I don't hear any discussion in regards to those issues. Then on the reversal side, if you look on the state level, you're talking about a state that's running a deficit. The question is, how do you address that deficit? Because you cannot pretty much, in my opinion, underwrite all issues that are basically be considered.
Okay. And what about access to port resources and port benefits throughout the entire district? Other candidates have talked about connecting good labor jobs to all parts of the district. What are your thoughts on that issue?
Well, first of all, the state does not control the port. That's number one. Number two, to me, there's a misnomer when you're talking about the port. You're talking about the Department I think it's called the Harbor Department. That's a government entity. That's not private sector based. Now, when you talk about jobs, that is where you talk about shippers, you talk about support services that are adjacent to the port, and also when this district when the lines were redrawn, that pulled in Carson, Athens, specifically, and that's on the far end of the district versus what is present in terms of San Pedro and Wilmington. The thing is that, again, the state does not control the economy. However, the state can, as a representative, you can create opportunities in terms of employment. Again, that's where I think there's a distinction between me, myself and others. Case in point, there's something called the Space Corridor. That's in Long Beach. I'm talking about connecting Long Beach in terms of what they're promoting in conjunction with LA. And again, that goes back to Phillips 66. Again, you're talking about land that is probably unique. It's only probably in the whole southern sphere, that's the only, I would say, land-based opportunities. Again, the problem is the fact that what's being pushed is warehouses. I'm talking about manufacturing. I'm talking about the new economy. I'm talking about the fact that, case in point, there was a company in Carson that built drones, but that they left and went to Torrance. Mm-hmm. The other thing, that this has been drained of companies. At one point in time, you had, I think, Toyota specifically had a headquarters in this region. They're all gone. That's because of three things. Taxation. It also has to do with the whole labor code, and it also has to do with the third component. Slips my mind. But those are two major things that, in my opinion, are front and center on the table. Again, we're losing jobs. We're not, environmental issues. Now, I'm not against environmental issues, but the fact is, some of these environmental regulations are killing employment, and that's something I would like to address.
Okay. And just for clarification purposes, you're making a distinction between the fact that the state has, as you say, no control over the ports, per se. Could you clarify what you mean by that?
Well, there's three state agencies, AIR, CEQA, and also those are two main agencies that have to do with the oversight of environmental issues. Now, the thing is that the port has a history of contributing to pollution. The state can impact that in terms of bringing regs into place where you basically put some type of guardrails around the existing issue. Again, when you're talking about air quality, that's where you're talking about the pollution that comes off ships and also comes off trucks. Again, that can be regulated, but that's not on a local level.
Okay. Another big issue that members of the Assembly District 65 are facing are affordability issues in housing, lack of housing, and everything's just too damn high. How are you planning to hope to address those issues if you're elected?
What is not known, and there's no emphasis given to the fact, the whole housing footprint was built around a single family house. That is where you have to, in my opinion, address density. You have to address in terms of affordability in the form of labor costs. It also has to do with the whole notion of increased population. So the question, how do you address that influx versus building? Now, from an affordability standpoint, to me, it's a slippery slope for two reasons. You're now talking about cost of labor, cost of materials, and again, you have an economy that is requires, in my opinion, for the state to step in. I'm talking about a state agency that's almost comparable to a Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, where you actually provide underwriting of housing, but it's on a state level. And case in point, what is not well known is the state will give you $140,000 for to purchase a house as first-time homeowners. So again, that's something that's not talked about. So I'm talking about expanding that concept. But the problem has to do with what's called a FICO score. In order to qualify for that money, it has to be 640. I'm talking about dropping it down to a 580, which is comparable to FHA type of standards.
And so are you, and then for clarification purposes, as your mindset is about increasing home ownership versus collaborating with cities like the city of Los Angeles and creating multi-family developments around transit corridors? Or I just want to make sure we get clarification on what your thoughts about increasing housing and affordability in the district.
Again, it's a slippery slope in the sense that historically, housing has been associated with single family. Now, case in point, you could bring in a piece of land that maybe is on the business corridor. You build on top of that particular site that has housing, but underneath you have commercial. Those are, to me, not being emphasized. I think you're talking about ADUs. Now, the problem there is the fact that you have to have the property in order to build that. The problem is that most property owners, in my opinion, are not into that because of the cost of building. Number two, it becomes a matter of can you recoup your investment if you basically go that direction.
Okay. And aside from ADUs, though, there are the building of condos and apartments and so forth around transit corridors, along the MTA routes and train routes. Albeit there's been some conflict, I think, between residents and developers on the placement of them, I think, at times, zoning rules, basically. What are your thoughts on dealing with those kinds of issues?
Well, that to me is a confrontation between availability of foot space versus the availability of the transit site itself. The problem is that a lot of transit sites are not in low-income areas. So the question is, how do a person who has moderate income or moderate or low income, how do they get access to a type of transit-based situation? And also you have an interesting thing in terms of gentrification. There's a tendency of those who have the money to attracted to those sites versus those who don't have the money. So the question becomes, how do you basically bridge that economic gap in regards to accessibility? I'm trying to think of an example. And this is not within the district, but when you look at what's happening over in the Crenshaw area, what you have is transit housing, but in the same breath, it's not attracting residents who are basically of moderate income. They're attracted more high end. So the question becomes, do you engage in subsidies, which I think is possibly the key, along with the fact you structure a housing project that provides accessibility to even those who are homeless. Now, the thing is that when you talk about the homeless population, my thing is, do you calculate into where they have access to transportation or to access those transit stops?
Okay. Did you have any other thoughts on how to address the affordability crisis that Americans, people in your district, are facing?
The question becomes, do you have the necessary income to address affordability? Therefore, you talk about jobs. Again, I go back to the Phillips 66 site. There's a possibility of producing between 5,000 to 15,000 jobs because it becomes a matter of, do you bring in a type of manufacturing that addresses those jobs? At the same token, they are good paying career jobs. They're not just salary jobs that have a dead end. When you look at Phillips 66 specifically, there is no discussion in regards to how that can impact the economy and therefore affect the whole issue of affordability. I'm promoting, again, manufacturing versus warehouses.
What are your stances on AI in the workplace, on the waterfront for that matter? Right now you got the IWU, SEIU, and other major unions now doing their best to try to sort of, they can't stop it, they know that already, but they're trying to re-educate their workers, including creating a whole skills center down here in Wilmington to retrain waterfront workers for a future that includes AI, or at least slow it down. What are your thoughts on that whole issue?
That becomes a matter of adjustment. The question becomes, does AI affect production or does it affect administration of the jobs themselves? AI has a slippery slope in the sense that it is more acclimated towards research. So the question becomes, when you do all this research, how do you apply that to a workplace type of circumstance? Again, you, on one hand, do you fear it or do you embrace it?
Right.
I think what's to happen is that you have to gradually incorporate that into the workplace, and you have to also educate the workers to the fact that it's not an enemy, but it's a companion.
And to clarify on my part, I also meant AI and automation. That's what I meant. And automation is probably more specific to what happens on the waterfront than AI is.
I am against the approach that has to do with automation because of the fact that it is not labor friendly. And what I mean by that is the fact that, do you basically do a supplement or do you basically subtract you subtract from it. My position is that unless the state steps in to make sure that it does not eliminate jobs, that becomes a challenge. So my position is real simple. I'm against automation in the present form because of the fact that is it management that's controlling it in terms of at the expense of the workers, or do the workers basically do an add-on to that particular concept?
Another big issue that many residents in the 65th districts are thinking about is, crime and addressing that issue. Perceived or not, the outgoing assemblyman had done a lot of work on comes to police reform, and he himself is actually a reserved sheriff's officer. Actually, I think about it.
Was he?
Yeah, reserved officer. That was part of his resume. And so people see him as both strong on crime, but at the same time, he understood the importance of making sure there was a police accountability. What are your thoughts about that in this particular moment in time?
I don't think that Zimmerman is a good example of police reform because there is a cloud over his background in regards to was he really a reserve officer or was he basically a ride-along? My understanding is the fact that there was a issue in regards to him being certified, but I really don't get involved in that. I would say more in terms of the question becomes, how do you act, how do you use the dollars that a police department has? Now, case in point, do you decrease the money? No. You add on to that money. But the thing is, how do you apply that money? My thing is you apply it to possibly non-lethal type of approaches. And what I mean by that is that it's my understanding that on the 911 calls, close to 40% are based upon a homeless problem or someone has a mental problem. Therefore, the question becomes, when that call first comes in, do you do an evaluation in regards to whether you really need a police officer? Do you need a non-uniform type person who is involved in mental health and also involved in regards to something that may be more associated with a non-violent type of crime? So my whole thing is you increase the budget, but in the same breath, you make sure those resources are acclimated towards assets that apply to a mental health type of crisis.
Okay. Position on workers' protections, particularly in this moment in where we have a federal government that is, really dead set on getting rid of all immigrants, hell, even American citizens, via deportation. But one of the ways they're doing about it, though, is actually attacking workers' rights. And as an assembly person, how would you protect workers' rights?
That is a issue of, on one hand, making sure that the worker is not exploited. It also applies to whether or not you have wage wealth. These workers, are they union workers? Now, my impression is that the labor force is being attacked in regards to those part of labor. So the question becomes, how do you, on one hand, protect those who are present in the market versus those who are trying to access the market? I believe that worker rights are subject to protections when it comes to wages, when it comes to health related issues. And the question becomes, is that environment suitable for a worker who is not so much aligned with management, but in the same breath, he is aligned with production. And then the production area, I believe that you have to focus in on the safety factors, and you also have to focus in on whether or not that is a dead-end job.
All right. Phillips 66, they got a plan out there that they're marketing to everybody in order to create space for warehouses and whatnot and industry, but as well as a space for the community in which they can live, work, and play. What are your thoughts about their plan?
I don't think it's being challenged. And what I mean by that is that the issue again goes to, do you go towards warehouses or do you go towards manufacturing? The one thing that's known is there's 3 different sites, the one in Wilmington, one in Carson, and one in Willowbrook. And the one in Carson is more restricted because of the lack of access to the port. My whole thing is proposing a type of concept which largely, that particular facility in Carson has access to the port, or either Port of LA or Port of Long Beach. The one in Wilmington is ideal in regards to, again, manufacturing, and then you have another smaller one, which I'm not sure what it's about in Willowbrook, but that is never talked about.
Okay. What do you like voters to know about you going forward in this race?
I think the distinction between myself and others are they talk about the issues. I mean, to me, education clearly is something that is important to our communities. But in the same breath, the question becomes, do or is that particular lane address the whole notion of jobs? On the other hand, you can talk about type of universal care, but the question becomes, how do you pay for it? Right now, if you were to set everyone at the table, the question becomes, are they talking about solutions? Are they talking about ideas? Are they talking about things that will lend to a better quality of life? And I think that's the distinction that I have versus them. Being a president of a neighborhood council, you get with all issues. You have to ask yourself who at the table is actually directly involved in all issues that are basically, they're almost like a microcosm of a city council seat versus a state seat. So I think the thing that I differ at is that I sit and I see all these things on a very direct local level versus on a conceptual basis.
All right. And last thoughts, anything you want the average voter to know about you when they go into the June primaries?
I think the voter has to ask themselves, are the candidates talking about issues? I mean, it's one thing to have all these endorsements, but those endorsements lead to a better quality of life. Does it lead to a environmental type of process that lends itself to improvement, either from a wage standpoint or from a health standpoint? Again, when you look at what's happening, you have a reduction of resources for Medi-Cal. The question becomes, even in that regards, do you basically bring the benefits and the services to the people, or do the people have to go to the resources and benefits? That's really promoting a kind of like a big van, which will rotate through the community, and therefore that person would not have to figure out how to get to the health facility. The facility comes to them.
If people want to learn more about your campaign, where can they go to visit, online and otherwise?
My website. I think if they go to my website, they will see some very...
Which is?
Lyons for Assembly. Versus, again, if you were to type that in, you go directly to my website, and there you get a lot more information on myself.
Awesome. Thank you, Mr. Lyons. I appreciate you for coming out, and good luck.
Thank you.
All right, now.